brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
We will call this meeting to order. Welcome to the November 16th, 2020 meeting of the Eau Claire Plan Commission. This meeting is being broadcast live by Valley Media Works on Charter Channel 994, WRFP LP 101.9 FM, and online at valleymediaworks.org. The Plan Commission attempts to conduct its public hearings in a relatively informal manner with the constraint that we must deal with the issues before us in an orderly and businesslike fashion. We give the applicant an opportunity to speak first, and then others, either for or against a proposal, are each permitted to speak once. We do request that everyone restrict their comments to the issues before us, avoid unnecessary repetition, and be prudent in the use of time. We want to be sure that we have adequate time to review and discuss all items with equal diligence. Most of us are calling in by computer or cell phone. I just ask that you be in a place where you'll be free from background distractions when it's time for you to speak. We're going to start with a roll call, starting with Commissioner Seymour.
Here.
Brenholt?
Here.
Granlund?
Here.
Greigert?
Here.
Christofferson?
Here.
Wolfgram?
Here.
Obaid?
Here.
And Chair is present. Any additions or corrections to the minutes from November 2nd? Seeing none, without objections, those minutes are approved. What am I missing here? Oh, okay. All right, minutes from November 2nd are approved. Next is the time that we allot for open public comment period for items that do not appear on this agenda as noted in public hearings or public discussion. Is there anyone who came to speak on a topic that is not listed on the agenda? I will check with, there's a couple of call-in users here. If you're calling in by landline, did you come to speak for the open comment period? Okay. All right. Next is a public hearing. This is the only public hearing item on our agenda tonight for recommendation to the City Council to rezone from R3P to R2P and amend R3P and recommend, let's see, on the southwest corner of Old Town Hall Road and Graff Road. Mr. Allen. And by the way, Mr. Allen, I see these items 5, 6, and 7 are all really the same item. Can we cover the discussion period under 5 and then conduct our votes?
Yes, I believe so, Mr. Chair. I should note that items 6 and 7 are just public discussion. So if there are members of the public here to speak on this item, it would just be for item number 5.
Okay.
But let's see here. It looks like I saw a note from Commissioner Prosnick. Can she be made a panelist? I think she's
oh my goodness, and I didn't call her for my apologies. Miss Commissioner Prosnick, can you hear me? Oops.
Guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Sorry, I missed you on the roll call. I didn't see you on the list because you were over on the other side.
Okay, I think I just got a message that I'm good now and it's showing up as a panelist. I'm here.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Yep.
Mr. Allen.
All right, great, thank you. Appreciate everybody's patience as we sort out technical issues. Thank you, Mr. Petrie, for sorting out our visuals as well. So as you see here, and as noted, Mr. Chair, you had noted items 5, 6, and 7 are all ways in the same property and the same project, and that is noted there in the southeast portion of the city. This project was before you just a few months ago for the general development plan and rezoning for next to duplexes, twin homes, and apartments in a project known as Timber Bluff Acres. This shows the overall, the kind of the proximity drawing, I should say, and notification. As you know and you saw for the previous drawing, it is right on the edge of the new city boundaries. So to the east is the town of Washington Town Hall, and again, vacant and agricultural land to the south and west. The property as a whole is about 38.4 acres in size. We'll go to the next slide, please. And this shows the amended plan as proposed. We do have another slide we'll show here in a moment. Thank you. That shows what was originally approved, recommended for approval by the Plan Commission just 2 months ago, and then brought forward to the City Council for their approval. Now, if we go back slide, thank you. This shows the amended version. As amended, Timber Bluff Acres would provide 276 housing units compared to the previously approved 328 units, still in 2 phases, with that configuration as noted in the staff report, a slight increase in twin home units, same number of 4-plex units, some new 5-plex units there, more to the center of the project, just a slight decrease in the 8-plex units, and additional 7-plex units, which are also new to this drawing. There are also several undefined multifamily buildings, and then the 60-plus campus to the northeast is down to 50 units total. So the open space still remains approximately the same, but just shy of 5 acres in size. It's shown as area 7 to the bottom center of the screen. And it's still proposed to have some sports courts, tot lots, trails, so on and so forth, as well as the primary stormwater features. And then essentially kind of a hub for, as you see there, kind of red or pink, the interior trail network. As you can see here between this and the previously approved plan, the applicant did respond to some of the recommendations by the Planning Commission and City Council to make some adjustments to that north-south westernmost drive, shown here as Field Crest Lane. Made kind of a bend in the road there to the northwest quadrant of the development to address some of the steep slopes as well as the existing wooded areas. Applicant is also requesting reduction in some of those front yard setbacks in that area in order to, again, address some steep slopes and the wooded areas to the west of the property, or the project, I should say, on each of those properties. As you can see as well, there's some additional east-west streets, primarily a public street there, connecting more to the north and central portion of the project, then also a private street for some of those 5-plex units, 7-plex units to the center of the project. So with that, I did also include, applicants still included in the narrative as well, some of their proposed rent rates and that kind of structure. also referencing a number of comments from engineering department, and thank you to Mr. Trevor Whitwer, who's also present there in chambers, can respond to some of the questions as well, especially related to the platting. Here's some additional versions, kind of just preliminary renderings or elevations of the different twin homes and other units. Again, final site plans would still be required moving forward, but again, the applicant's looking to start the initial work to do the overall groundwork out there and get some of the twin home units started as well. This shows the aerial. As you can see, there kind of nodule to the northwest part of the property that shows that some steep slopes and the wooded areas that was a particular interest and concern from the Planning Commission at the last time this came forward. So with that, I'm happy to continue with comments on the preliminary plat and final plat, unless Mr. Sherry would like to stop for questions at this point.
Let's see if we have any questions yet from the commission.
Okay.
I see none.
If not, we can jump ahead.
Yep, go right ahead.
Yeah, we'll jump back to item 6 and 7. Again, same proximity map here. This shows the overall platting and how some of those lots primarily relates to the twin homes layout there on the west side of the project. There are a total of 51 proposed lots, 5 outlots. They do meet the standards set forth, R2P and R3P, again, presuming favorable recommendation for those setbacks as well. So moving ahead to the next drawings, thank you. This is for the final plat. There's some last minute changes. I may defer to Mr. Whitwer or the applicant to discuss those, but you can see there to the kind of the west central outlot 1, that is what was proposed, but that is being modified, I believe, in the next slide, thank you, to show those separate lots as well. And again, I may defer to Mr. Whitwer to talk about that. I think there's some interest in deeding those over, dedicating those over to the city for drainage and such, but that's not of particular interest to the city at this point. So Mr. Whitwer has any other comments on that part?
Okay, any questions from the commission?
Yeah, stand for any questions.
I see none. So we will check with, I think Mr. Bohan is here for that. And it's not allowed.
Yes, I do see Mr. Wiggins and Mr. Garpin are also both on the line, and they are involved in this project as well.
How come I don't get the unmute button anymore? All right. Mr. Bohan, can you hear me? Mr. Bohan, can you hear me? Boy. All right, we're going to I'm sorry, Mr. Bohan, I just can't seem to get you to be able to. Oh, wait. Mr. Bohan, can you hear me now?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
All right, Sean Bohan, 1504 Sherwin Avenue, Eau Claire. So we are back here showing some modifications to the general development plan. Mr. Allen did a great job of explaining some of the changes that are being proposed. Staff thought that since the underlying zoning was a little bit, we're going to have some R2P on top of some R3P that we should bring it back to Planning Commission and also to City Council. So along what we're referring, or on the western edge, we did end up replacing some multifamily with some twin homes. That was one of the modifications, and then a couple of the communities did get modified. We ended up modifying some of the number of units and then the type of units. After consulting with the developers, they wanted to go with a little bit different style. There had been a number of buildings that are fairly repetitious kind of throughout Eau Claire and stuff, so they were looking for something that's just a little bit different. So we mixed things up a little bit. We did end up putting another public street that ends up going east-west. I guess one other thing that I would like to end up noting is that Community 4, which is the center area that ends up having the private street that loops through it, we're looking at potentially doing that as the 60-plus community and actually more of multifamily, bigger units and stuff up in that northeast corner of the site. After conferring with the developers, they thought that'd be a good central location for the 60-plus community, close to the proposed park, trails, that type of stuff. So with that, that's basically the modifications. And again, Mr. Allen did end up stating that we did make a modification to the furthest west road by putting a bend in there and trying to get that away, a little bit further away from some of the steep slopes. We certainly are still going to be into that area, cutting part of that hill down, but it was a consensus with both Planning Commission and with council and stuff that we can see if we can modify that to end up saving some of the trees and some of the slopes. And then again, just with the 25-foot setbacks within the twin homes, we're just trying to get away from that western property line and potentially save some trees and stuff that are along that edge that the cursor's falling on. And with that, I am here to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions from the commission for Mr. Bohan? Mr. Gregor.
Thank you, Chair Larson. Thank you, Mr. Bohan and Mr. Allen. Just kind of wondering a bit of the rationale behind, private streets versus public streets in some of the areas, and some of that would be for Mr. Bohan, but also for Mr. Allen, just to kind of, the piece for Mr. Allen may be like, what are the pros and cons from the city's perspective? Having a private street, and then for Mr. Bohan, I guess why are you proposing private streets, and do you see like curb and gutter on those, or what exactly do they look like?
So the private streets, we would look at probably having a minimum of like 24 feet of surface on it. Typically, we would end up having some curb and gutter where it's needed, or we would end up having drainage maybe pulling down the center of that. We don't want it certainly along either edge. The rationale behind it, there's a little bit, it's kind of twofold. Number one is that when we end up having public streets, you end up having a right-of-way that ends up being, let's just say 60 feet of right-of-way. And then from there, you end up having setbacks with let's just say the R3P that would end up being 20 or 25 feet. So all of a sudden you have an area through there that ends up basically being about 100 feet before you can end up having any buildings. So it starts to cut down on some of the density that you're able to have. In addition to that, when we're proposing the 60-plus community, We really like to end up having that as public, as in the sense where it ends up being more of a driveway and then coming into the individual units and their garages, that type of stuff. Ends up being low traffic. The only people that will be going in there are the residents, or should be going in there, are typically the residents that live there. So it's kind of the rationale behind that. Again, similar to the area in the northeast also is where we're showing that public or the private street also. Again, that's something that just ends up being for community members. It'll be taken care of by an association or by the property managers, depending on which route the developers end up going. And then, the city doesn't have to take over the streets and the maintenance. Now, the utilities within it, we typically would end up having, if it's servicing multiple buildings, that type of thing, then we would typically end up having public utilities. That we will end up working out with staff on whether they, depending on the number of units, whether they want that as a public or private or sanitary sewer and water.
Okay, Mr. Allen, did you have a response?
No, I really don't have much else to add to what Mr. Bohan said. I think that's consistent with what I would envision in this area. I may defer to Mr. Whitworth on behalf of the engineering department, but things that we always look for though too is obviously emergency vehicle access through there to make sure there's enough width for that. Same with turn radius and things of that sort, that it's not it's essentially built, as I say, kind of quote, to city standards. It's still a functional roadway in that regard. Other things we'd be looking for be parking versus no parking, and that situation again to maintain that throughway for emergency access is really the main thing we're looking at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the commission? Commissioner Gregor?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Larson. I just have another question about, this is about the trail system, which I really appreciate the way it, provides the connectivity along with the sidewalk system. But one of the aspects of connectivity that I find frustrating sometimes as a bicyclist trying to use trails that are built in developments that are like more the private trails is that they'll often, when they tee up with a public street, they don't have a curb cut to the public street. They just go to the sidewalk. I guess I was wondering, maybe a question for Mr. Bohan, are you planning to connect those places where those three places where the trail like tees with a road? Are you planning on having curb cuts to the public street, and maybe for Mr. Whitworth, if that's something that the city would find advisable or appropriate, given that sometimes there's safety issues with that, obviously too.
Mr. Bohan?
Yes, we can certainly end up looking at that. I know that there's one spot when we're hooking in or teeing into, I think it's Woodland Park Drive, where it ends up being directly across from a driveway into those fourplexes. We can certainly look at that, but there will be a crossing that's just to the south of that, so I don't know if we want to put them out in traffic that's not at a controlled intersection. So I would think that we'd be able to end up, with that distance and stuff, be able to maybe not have a crossing there. On the other one that ends up being on the west side, we can certainly end up looking at it with engineering and with staff, and if that's something that they recommend, I don't believe that we'd be opposed to it.
Mr. Whitworth, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, that's something we can work out as we go through plan approval between staff and the applicant, and we can certainly look at adding those curb cuts at those locations.
Okay, any other questions from the commission? All right, Mr. Bohan, it looks like I'm gonna have the same problems with Mr. Gartman and Mr. Wiggins that I had with you. Do you know if they had things they wanted to add?
I'm sorry, you were asking if I knew of anything that they wanted to add?
Mr. Gartman's got his hand up. Just a minute. I'm working on it, Mr. Gartman. All right, let's try making him a panelist. What did you do with Sean to get it working? I don't even get I can't unmute him. Huh? Mr. Gartman, can you hear me? No, he's not. He doesn't even have the little microphone there. And you can't, I made him a panelist trying to get that to work, but. Mr. Gartman, can you hear me? Oh, boy. Mr. Bohan?
Yes, I can maybe end up speaking for Mr. Gartman. And I think Mr. Allen had touched on it, just the difference between the preliminary plat and the final plat. And then we did end up having a modification on that final plat to show lots 16 and 17 expanded into, on the final plat, it was shown as Outlot 1. It was something that we talked with staff about. The city wasn't interested in taking over that lot for stormwater, as it didn't end up having anything from the right-of-way of this proposed plat. And therefore, we went ahead and changed it. So now lots 16 and 17 will end up having stormwater easements on them. But the city, it won't be an outlot, so the city won't have to end up worrying about that. So that was one thing I know that Mr. Gartman was going to mention.
Okay. Mr. Gartman, I sent you a message. Are you able to see that? Well, hopefully we're not missing anything important. Mr. Gartman, why don't you try calling in on your cell phone? In the meantime, I'm going to move on to the public hearing portion of this. If you have called in, and I see we have 1, 2, 3 people called in through landline. I'll check with each of them individually. If you called in on the landline to talk to the public hearing on this item for rezoning, can you let me know your name and address? Okay, that was call-in user number 4. Let's try number 6. If you called in to talk for the public hearing on the rezoning, item number 5, can you identify yourself, please? Okay, not that one. Good evening. If you've called in to speak for the public hearing on the rezoning, item number 5, could you let us know your name and address?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
My name is Joanne Herbinson. I live on 5990 Graff Road.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you have to say
And
about?
I wasn't able to get in the very beginning of the meeting. I had trouble getting on with my iPad, but my basic concerns about the whole project is, again, its density. You're putting 600 to 1,000 people on a corner of a field. I would think people that would want to be in a dense community like that would rather be in town where there's all sorts of, restaurants and bars and things for them to do. You're putting close to 1,000 people out in the middle of nowhere that'll have to drive everywhere. And, it's not really consistent with the rest of the communities around here. As far as traffic, you're going to have 500 cars leaving out of that corner. It's just, these are country roads, and they can be dangerous roads. There's no center line. And I just don't know that amount of people in this country area is really going to be, safe and making good sense. I mean, I would think you'd want to spend your money to send 600 to 1,000 people downtown and look at the impact that they would have, on your downtown. So again, the big concern is the density. I'm not opposed to, building subdivisions. We have a ton of subdivisions going up all over, and the traffic has increased dramatically on Graff Road. And so adding another, 500 cars leaving for work in the morning, it's just going to be quite crazy. In addition, you've got your fire station there that needs to get out at a moment's notice. And you've got all sorts of cars and congestion. I mean, I just really think that you need to think about, is this the appropriate place to put, 800 to 1,000 people?
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the commission? All right. Thank you very much for calling in.
You're welcome.
All right.
Can it,
Oh,
Gartman?
Mr. Gartman, we can hear you.
Oh, thank goodness. Yeah, I'm here representing Real Land Surveying on the preliminary and final plat and also the rezone. We've worked with the city to develop this plan utilizing the easements and taking their recommendations for trails and everything else that went along with this. And if anybody has any questions for me, I'll be willing to answer them.
Any questions from the commission for Mr. Gartman? All right, I see none. Thank you. Thanks for your persistence. I don't know what changed, but all of a sudden we got you, so. All right. So we will see, we're going to vote on each of these individually. So let's see, first of all, if we have a motion for item number 5, which is rezoning and amending the general development plan. Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. Before we get to that stage, could I ask the representative of the city engineering to respond to the traffic concerns of the call-in person?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so there was a TIA done for this project, and there will be an estimated 2,100 trips per day. And during the peak AM hour, there will be 130 trips, and during the peak PM hour, there will be 155 trips. There are 3 access points to this development, and the current traffic volumes and with the proposal are not, they're not high enough to warrant any dedicated turn lanes, and everything with this development included in the TIA will leave those access points at a level of service of B with full build out of this development. So there will be an increase in traffic, but overall it will not be significantly staggering to traffic out there.
Thank you.
All right, perfect, thank you. I'll check once more if there are any additional questions for staff or the applicants. All right, seeing none, let's see if there's a motion for the rezoning under item number 5. Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. I'll make a motion with staff recommendations for approval.
Okay, Commissioner Wolfgram.
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion for item number 5, the rezoning and the amended general development plan? Commissioner Wolfgram? Oops, all right.
No, excuse me, I just didn't put my hand down, pardon me.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the roll. Commissioner Seymour.
Aye.
Greigert. Oh.
Aye.
Brenholt.
Aye.
Granlund.
Aye.
Christofferson.
Aye.
Prosnick. Wolfgram.
Aye.
Obeyed.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. That item passes. Item number 6 is a public discussion for approval by the Plan Commission, the preliminary plat. Are there any additional questions from the commission for staff or the applicant? Seeing none, we'll see if there's a motion for item number 6, the preliminary plat. Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. So moved.
Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll second.
Commissioner Brenholt seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the roll. Commissioner Seymour.
Aye.
Brenholt.
Aye.
Granlund.
Aye.
Greigert.
Aye.
Christofferson.
Aye.
Prosnick.
Aye.
Wolfgram.
Aye.
Obeyed.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the item number 6, the preliminary plat, has passed. Item number 7 is again the same development for recommendation. It's a public discussion item for recommendation to City Council to recommend approval of the final plat. Any discussion or any questions from the commission for staff or the applicant on this item? Seeing none, we'll see if there's a motion.
Motion to approve?
Was that Commissioner Prosnick?
Yep.
Okay, is there a second? Commissioner Seymour.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion for the recommendation of approval for the final plat? I see none, so we will call the roll. Commissioner Seymour.
Aye.
Brenholt.
Aye.
Granlund.
Aye.
Greigert.
Aye.
Christofferson.
Aye.
Prosnick. Commissioner Prosnick?
Aye.
Commissioner Wolfgram?
Aye.
Obeyed.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Item number 7 passes. Item number 8 is public discussion for approval by the Plan Commission for a multi-tenant building to approve the site plan and approve the site plan for a multi-tenant building on West Claremont Avenue. Mr. Petrie.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Plan Commission and members of the public. Number 8 is SP 2035, located on south of Claremont Avenue, west of Stein Boulevard. Aerial photograph showing the proposed parcel that will be created with a certified survey map that's in your packet as well. It's currently the vacant parking lot for Shopco, which is the vacant store. In your packet is the site plan, elevation, floor plan, certified survey map, and elevations of the proposed multi-tenant building. On the screen now is the floor plan showing plus or minus 2,400 square foot Chipotle with the drive-through, a 2,800 square foot Shopco optical, and a potential up to 4,900 square feet for available space for a potential tenant. That would be an end cap between Starbucks and this proposed development. Starbucks is to the west. The Jimmy John's shopping center is to the east. That Jimmy John's has been relocated to Craig Road, which was approval site plan that also houses Verizon store and a furniture store. Utility plan is shown on your screen now. The utilities will come from the street into the proposed multi-tenant building. Lighting plan was provided by the applicant showing the light intensity for the site, which it does not really leave the site as shown. The landscape plan is shown on the screen as well, showing they're adding significantly more landscaping than what's currently there. And we'll get into details about that. I did provide an aerial photograph showing Shopco used to, as many of you remember, used to have 2 to 3, 4 greenhouses on the site during the spring, summer, and fall months. And you can see the area that this developer is proposing to develop has very few to 0 cars. If you've been by the site in the last, Shopco closed on June 20th of 2019, over a year and a half ago. And as you know, this area has been vacant, hasn't seen any new development, any recent new development. Here's an elevation showing the proposed multi-tenant building. With that, there is a sign plan approval as shown on the screen. The 2 end caps, Chipotle is one of them, would be allowed 1 additional sign on the side. This is showing on this, through the drive-through, would be allowed 1 sign, and then on the northwest corner, that tenant would be allowed additional sign. The middle tenants, the Shopco optical, would only be allowed 1 wall sign as shown. And then there is the better elevation showing the proposed tenants. And again, on the sides, those would be allowed additional wall signage as shown. And then the square footage potentially could be up to 4 tenants. I did want to include this. This was not included in your packet, but there was a question raised about the existing parking lot, and staff did not provide it in the staff report, but just wanted to reassure you that what we're approving this evening, we believe that the parking lot is still way over parked. As shown on the screen, when Starbucks went in 2006, you can see the drive-through there. There was existing 562 stalls. When Starbucks went in, there's 521 stalls remaining. Real quick calculation that I did, the existing Shopco is 93,000 square feet. That would total to about 250 square feet of retail. You divide that by, and that comes out to 375 stalls. Still, in our opinion, they're way over parked. And we don't believe that the Shopco will be redeveloped into a retail store or if it is, it will be broken up many times because tenants today do not need 93,000 square feet. So with that being said, I would go through the report. The applicant is proposing approximately 10,000 square foot building with a certified survey map east of the existing Starbucks, west of the existing shopping center. Well, within the proposal, the applicant is proposing 73 stalls to be replaced. And broken that down, the parking requirement would be based on a shopping center, which is 55 stalls. That is about 25% over. The Plan Commission will need to find that appropriate. Chipotle typically does not do a drive-through. Obviously, with COVID and everything else that's going on, Chipotle is putting a drive-through in, which I have never seen in my planning career, but I think it's a neat concept. Chipotle is a casual fast food. This area is screaming for it, as you can imagine, with all the college students, CVTC, UWEC, all the medical and millennials within the area that typically go to Chipotle. They will definitely appreciate that. With that being said, there is a few conditions that need to be met, and I'll go through those. A pedestrian connection shall be added on the east side of the site. That pedestrian connection, as some people know, there is some curb stops along the sidewalk. Now, there is not much room in between the sidewalk and the parking lot. As shown on the screen, it's all concrete or asphalt with curb stops, so it's not very pedestrian friendly and or bicycle friendly. The city of Eau Claire, along with WSDOT, did add a trail line from Highway 37 along Highway 12, Claremont, heading from east to west, or west to east. They did add a crossing, which I have shown on, oh, that aerial does not have it. Let me get there real quick. This crossing was added thanks to Google Maps, and that's right on this site. So this would be on the northeast corner of the site plan. Staff is recommending that this area all be converted to landscaping along with a pedestrian connection. So they would remove the curbing, they would remove the asphalt and make it an entrance into it. This sidewalk connection would be for pedestrians and bicycles. This area was developed, and it was always been a challenge and continues to be a challenge for walkers and bikers. That's not going to change, but this minor changes to this site plan would go a long ways to accessing the site and making it a little more pedestrian friendly and bicycle friendly. In addition, the applicant should be adding at least 4 stalls for bicycle parking. 4 U-shaped racks, which actually is 8 stalls. Talking with the applicant this afternoon, the prime spots for not only Chipotle and also Shop Galapagos is along the front. Typically, the entrances and exits are where bicycle racks should go. It is up to this commission to decide if it's appropriate to remove one of those stalls and add the bicycle parking, and or the applicant would be proposing bicycle parking somewhere on the site near the entrance. And that should be up to 4 U-shaped racks, which is 8 stalls. The landscape plan, as mentioned before, does add a significant amount of landscaping to an area that has a lack of landscaping. Staff would note that west of this, western of this site, especially along the road, it does appear to be lacking any kind of street trees and or green area. It is not noted in the conditions this evening, but staff would be adding a condition right now that the pedestrian link should be added to the west side of the site. So if a bicycle or a walker is coming from the west, they would not be able to access the site. The reason being is because those curb stops, again, are in the way. So staff thought it would be appropriate to add a western connection. It could be west of the handicap stall, going out to the sidewalk, and then removing 2 or 3 parking stalls adding the pedestrian connection and also adding the landscaping. That landscaping could include trees or shrubs or both, a combination thereof. Staff would also mention that the existing ground sign that Shopko has is going to be removed, and that's in the middle of the site. The pre-development meeting with the applicant, they were trying to leave that sign there, but the traffic and access just did not work. So the applicant is proposing to relocate that sign to the eastern part, as shown on the screen, east of the drive-through lanes for that sign. My understanding, this commission does allow for a sign easement. So if there is a redevelopment of Shopko, they would be allowed to put their name up there. Now, that is currently the same parcel, but as this site plan shows and the CSM shows, this would be a subdivided lot. But with this approval this evening, the Plan Commission is with the understanding that they would allow the Shopko redevelopment site to be added to that pole sign at a later date. Now, typically, pole signs are not reviewed by this commission. That would be reviewed by staff. But as mentioned in the report, that vacant Shopko would want and would be allowed to add their name or tenant name to that pole sign. In addition to that, there is some other conditions that need to be met, as noted in the report. Utility plan, grading and drainage is noted in your report. Traffic and transit is also noted. They are not adding any additional access points, so that they will use the existing access point there, which is shown here. And then also they'll have a cross-access shared parking with Starbucks and or the Shopko vacant building. Staff does also believe that this will make, hopefully, Shopko redevelop faster than, say, Kmart and or any large vacant building in this community. For example, Mega East or the Gordy's on Hamilton. Infill development like this, the multi-tenant, the commercial chains are willing to pay higher rents for the site. So with that being said, there is a couple conditions like I mentioned. We did add the condition on the west to be added connection with the crosswalk. We'll work with the developer and the applicant and their team when they do revise the site plan to make sure they are in compliance with the standards this evening. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions from the commission for Mr. Petrie? Commissioner Gregor.
Thank you, Chair Larson, and thank you, Mr. Petrie. I guess my question would be about, I appreciate the recommendations from staff about the two pedestrian connections from Hendrickson Drive to the north, and the addition of bicycle parking. I guess I would prefer that, we utilize some of those one of the parking spaces for bike parking, but how many parking spaces are extra after all of that is done? Because I think it says in the packet that there's quite a few extra spaces that go beyond the 125%.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of how many could also maybe potentially be used for green space?
Yes, excellent question, Commissioner Gregor. Based on my math, I don't have it exactly in front of me, but the shopping center is 5.5 stalls per 1,000, which is 180 square feet, divided by 10,000, which comes out to plus or minus 55 stalls. Then they're allowed to go 125% over that. I think it came out to about 69 stalls. So they would be losing a few stalls because of the connections of the pedestrian connection from the east and to the west, which comes out to about 68 stalls plus or minus. Most of the commission knows that Chipotle does require a significant more parking than 5.5 stalls per 1,000. Chipotle, as many of you may know, has significantly amount of workers, and then also their guest volume is higher than a typical restaurant with a drive-through. And the applicant can speak more to that. But if you do remove the 3 stalls on the east side and 2 to 3 stalls on the west side, there'd be down 6, so there'd be about plus or minus 67 stalls existing, and additional 1 more for bicycle parking, so you'd be at 66 stalls. And that would be with the understanding that the revisions would be in compliance with that. Hopefully that answers your question, Mr. Grigert.
Yeah, I think that does. Thank you. I do have another question. That's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm seeing the dumpster enclosure on the southwest and a crosswalk to the east of that and a sidewalk connection. So presumably that connection's primarily for employees to be able to bring garbage and recycling and stuff to that area. That's what I was wondering about, is if it would, and this may also be for the applicant in terms of what their needs are, but it seems like it would make sense to move that dumpster enclosure to the east so that the crosswalk and sidewalk could also be useful for people who are accessing the site in a safe manner, because when you're having traffic going east, I'm assuming that dumpster enclosure will create kind of a blind spot for people who are walking from the dumpster area north to the building. And it's also just not a very intuitive pedestrian connection if you're trying to go between like the Shopco area and the building. So just trying to see if it would be possible to move that dumpster enclosure east. I know it would make that second driving lane a little bit shorter, but that was just something that came to mind.
Yeah, excellent question as well. I would defer that one to the applicant.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, is this Mr. Stein?
Yep.
Okay.
So I'm Adam Stein. I'm the architect on this project, project design and architecture. Yeah, those are good questions. The first thing that I wanted to stress is, we kind of have what I would consider my retail, like all-star team on this project, right? We have brokers, developers, as well as the architect, civil engineer. We do a substantial amount of retail, not only in this state, but in other states. And we spent probably about a year working on this in order to figure out the best site arrangement and to satisfy the parking requirements of prospective tenants, right? So understandably that the 5.5 per thousand is what is part of the zoning code, but a tenant, for instance, like Chipotle, is looking for more of the 10 to 15 stalls per 1,000 square feet. So to kind of, I want to make sure that it's understood that we're not at a point where we feel or our tenants feel that there's excess parking on the site, even though it's respectively, more than what your zoning code permits. We're trying to keep this in a space, the last thing that anybody wants is for us to construct this building and for there to be vacancies that are sitting in it. And, over our years of experience working with retail tenants, we know that parking, as well as kind of protecting that, what we'd call critical zone of parking, which is directly in front of the building leading out to the street, is incredibly important to the tenants, and not only the tenants that, we're looking to sign leases with, but also prospective tenants on the site. So the connection in the rear, next to the trash, you're correct, that is to lead out of rear doors from each of the tenants to lead to the trash enclosure. But it also leads to an area of shared parking with Shopco. So we are pursuing a cross easement for shared parking back there that would be primarily for employee parking. So that kind of gives you an idea of how important the parking is on the site, not only to the tenants that, we're really close to lease signing on, but also to tenants that we're trying to get to come to the center. I guess to further address the trash enclosure shifting, the bailout lane of the drive-through, per prototype of Chipotle, as well as, their very strong desires, is to have a full bailout lane that would, basically that we put our trash enclosure in the way of. So there's been a lot of discussions that happen kind of on the front end with that, providing them a bailout lane that also duals as parking access along that one way. That allows people to kind of get out of line. If their food's not ready at the window, they can kind of shift off to the side, and that staff can run it out to them. So it's kind of like a big collaborative effort. Everybody's kind of giving a little bit in order for us to be able to satisfy the requirements of all the tenants and the developers in the site.
Okay, any questions from the commission for Mr. Stein? Mr. Greger.
Thank you, Chair Larson. Mr. Stein, the angled parking on the east side, is that kind of for people that are waiting to get food delivered to them? I don't often go to fast food places and especially not often by car. So I guess I'm just trying to understand all the different pieces of this.
Yeah, the two stalls to the furthest north are what we anticipate as being pull-up parking stalls. They're actually part of kind of Chipotle's prototype. And that's to keep the drive-through moving and to make sure that we never get to the point where we're exceeding the queue lines. The other parking is I would consider it as general overflow parking that's going to be there. When the center is more full, those are probably going to be the last spots that are taken. But they satisfy the requirements that we're anticipating future tenants needing. When we look at the additional 4,900 square feet, I would suspect that we're going to be looking at another 2,000 to 2,500 square foot restaurant user. That's typically who the end caps get kind of marketed to. And then with the leftover space, it's further to the east of that would be more of an infill. So that could be a wide variety of shops that could potentially go in there. Generally with these centers, we get a little bit of shared parking that goes on. But when you get to a point where you have restaurants that are serving lunch and dinner traffic, especially with the drive-through, we just want to make sure that we have substantial amount of parking that's there. So I can say also in regards to the bicycle parking, we agree. We think that that's a good idea to put on site. That's obviously something that's heavily used in the area, enough that you guys have put in a bicycle path. The key pieces that I wanted to hit on that I talked to Ryan about this afternoon is from the west side of the building to the east side of the building, in front of the building, that's what we consider the critical parking zone, right? So we'd want to do crosswalk connections, bike parking areas outside of that zone. Anything we put in that zone or any modifications that we make can pretty much guarantee that we're going to see some pushback from the tenants that we already are real close to having locked in this, as well as future tenants. So I think to explore those options outside of that with staff, I think it's fine. But we'd be more than happy to put those in. We already had to go back to all of our tenants when in working with staff when we agreed to move the pylon sign to better vehicular circulation across the front, which you can imagine was not an expected cost from the developer, and it is proving to be a pretty substantial cost. So I think overall it makes this development quite a bit better. Shifting it over to the east, I think, it helps the circulation, it helps the visibility. It seems like there can be a shared effort there with the future tenant of the Shopco space. So it seems like a win-win. We're just, we're pretty far along in this process. And I'm not sure if Ryan shared with you or not, but, we're getting pressure to fast-track this from tenants that are involved and future tenants that are interested. We're actually probably 95% of the way done with our permit set of drawings. It goes to state in about a week and a half. So we're willing to entertain, to work with staff to make some of these adjustments.
but we just want to make sure that they're reasonable and that we're not going to get significant pushback from the tenants and the players that are kind of already involved in the project. Also, I just wanted to point out, in addition to the landscaping, obviously, I think there was a comment made that, it'd be nice to have landscaping in the north. Obviously, that would have a significant impact to the center. Right now there's parking with curb stops right up against the property line, basically, that has sidewalk that's in it. So there really just is an opportunity to put that in there. I think what we're providing is obviously, significantly more than what's there right now, but it's also substantially more than what all of the other adjacent tenants in the area have. And I think far exceeds any of the general expectations or requirements that the city has. So with that, I'm here for further questions.
Okay. Commissioner Greger, did you have another question, or?
Wait, I haven't thought of anything yet.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? All right, I see none. We will see if there is a motion for this item. Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. Motion to approve with staff recommendations.
Commissioner Christopherson.
I second.
Is there any discussion? Commissioner Greger.
Thank you, Chair Larson. I guess I'd like kind of a rundown of what the staff recommendations are in this case, considering some of the specifics are not necessarily in the packet as far as I know. I guess the two pieces that I'd be interested in clarification on are whether there'd be one or two pedestrian connections from Hendrickson Drive, and where staff would recommend the bike parking to go.
Great. Yes, I'll clarify the condition. So condition number 1 would be to remove parking stalls on the east to allow for a crosswalk. So that would be from, as you can see on the screen, it's on the northeast side. That would remove those 3 stalls. And then you would stripe along the drive aisle to the front door or within close proximity to the Chipotle front door. The other condition that I would add would be on the west side, from next to the handicap stall, heading north to the sidewalk. You'd be removing those 2 to 3 stalls with the curb stops and adding landscaping and pedestrian connection there. Again, striping the drive aisle to allow for the pedestrians there. The bicycle parking should be added to the site, which is 4 U-shaped stalls, which I put near the patio, but now looking at it, and Mr. Stein spoke to it, those are crucial sites of where they prefer not to have it. It would make sense, in my opinion, on the west side, one of the handicap stalls would be moved down and the bicycle parking would go there. And then on the east side is a challenge, in my opinion. It could go near the pole sign location and or near the patio location. It's just going to be a little harder to get those 2 stalls of bicycle parking in there. Just thinking out loud, the only other option would be to remove one of the stalls on the east side, the angle parking in, and put the 2 bicycle racks there. Ideally, that would, it may or may not work, but we'll work with the applicant on that. The other condition that is noted in the report is the engineering approval of grading and drainage. And those are the 4 conditions for consideration this evening. And any other conditions that the commission would want to add.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any other discussion? I see none, so we will call the roll. Commissioner Seymour.
Aye.
Brenholt.
Aye.
Granlund.
Aye.
Greigert.
Aye.
Christofferson.
Aye.
Prosnick.
Aye.
Wolfgram.
Aye.
Obeyed.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and that item passes. Future agenda items and announcements. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you not have anything to add at this moment other than your next, two things, I guess. I don't have anything to add except two things. As noted in your comprehensive plan work session prior to this meeting, anticipate having the next work session on Monday, December 14th, before your one meeting that you have in December. This is one of those odd 5 Mondays and 3 plan commission meetings in November. So you do have a meeting 2 weeks from tonight on Monday, November 30th, which is the Monday right after Thanksgiving. So if there are any anticipated absences or other conflicts, please let us know right away to ensure we do have a quorum. And let me defer to Mr. Petrie. I do believe we have a handful of items, but nothing, not a long agenda, I should say.
Okay. Any other announcements or future agenda items from the commission? Seeing none, without objection, this meeting is adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. Call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689 or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.